Okay, everyone. Well, we get a presentation ready to go. We just want to welcome you again to this LIHEAP webinar on categorical eligibility. Again, my name is Benita Tinaraja, and I'm your facilitator today from the Technical Assistance team here at Brilliant. I want to apologize again for the short delay in getting the webinar started, but thank you so much for joining us today. You are currently all in listen-only mode. After dialing into the webinar, you should have entered in your access code and audio PIN, which I'm sure you're all familiar with now, are located in your control panel. And it's important that you enter in that audio PIN, as that enables me to unmute your line so that you're able to speak on the call later. And when it's time for question and answers, you can enter in your questions into the questions box in your control panel, or you can click on the raised hand icon in your control panel as well. And then we'll go through the queue and call on you and unmute your line. And please note that we are going to be holding questions until the end of the presentation. We are recording this session today just for the purposes of taking notes. And before we introduce Lauren Christopher, I would like to turn it over to our moderator today. Grace Chandler is also part of the Technical Assistance team here at Brilliant. She's a senior project manager and helped develop this presentation with Lauren. And Grace, would you like me to turn the screen over to you? Or do you need another second?
Go ahead.
Okay. Turn it over to Grace.
Good afternoon, everyone. And today we do have Lauren Christopher, who is the Director of the Division of Energy Assistance from the Office of Community Services. And Benita, are you able to see my screen?
We sure are. Yep.
Okay.
Definitely can.
Great. Lauren, I'm going to go ahead with the next slide. Our interview today is with Lauren, and we're going to do it in an interview format. So we will go ahead with our interview. Lauren, what are the three most important areas you would like to cover in today's session?
Okay, thanks, Grace, and welcome to everybody for joining today's webinar. Today we're going to talk about categorical eligibility, talk a little bit about the parts of the LIHEAP statute that speak to categorical eligibility, and talk a little bit about how different states have interpreted those rules, as well as distinguish categorical eligibility from automatic enrollment, as well as make a distinction between the income eligibility determination versus the LIHEAP benefit determination, and the different processes that are involved in those two decisions.
Thank you.
Before we begin, if we'd like to start with a short poll, Grace?
Yes, I'm going to. You're going to see a poll come up, and we want you to select the answers that are correct. And the question is, which of these eligibility categories may automatically qualify a household for LIHEAP benefits? The poll is launching, and you can enter more than one response as correct. We have 44% have entered their responses. Okay, 71%. I'll be closing the poll in another few seconds. Okay, I'm going to close the poll. And Lauren, you're going to see the responses.
Okay, great. So 90% thought TANF could qualify as a categorical eligibility program, 84% SSI, and then some people selected Medicaid, SCHIP, or the specified low-income Medicare beneficiary. The correct answers from these choices are SSI and TANF. The other three are not part of the LIHEAP statutes. allowable categorical eligibility programs, but SSI and TANF are just 2 of 4 different types of program categories that can be selected, and we'll talk about that in just a minute.
Thank you all for entering your responses. First, if you would remind us what a regular LIHEAP income eligibility process involves.
Sure. So before we even get to categorical eligibility, just a quick recap of what a normal income eligibility determination involves. So the LIHEAP grantee gets to decide what income maximum limits you're going to have, whether that's 150% of federal poverty guidelines or 60% of state median income, the greater of the two. And the grantee also sets up some sort of LIHEAP application process, decides what supporting documentation is allowable, necessary to process the LIHEAP application. You decide how you're going to define income, how you're going to count that, and we'll talk a little more about that in a minute. And then you work out your procedures for, again, your income, your intake staff reviewing the income-related documentation, verifying that data, doing the income calculation. If you're using some sort of database, entering that data into the database, which may even do the income calculation based on the sources that are entered, and then working out what that determination is, if the household is income eligible or not. And of course, grantees also have the flexibility in deciding if you're going to have additional eligibility criteria, such as an assets test or a co-payment requirement or some sort of documentation that they're working part-time or in school part-time. And so we've seen a wide variety of different additional eligibility criteria that are involved in that first decision-making process.
Thank you. Are there types of income that cannot be counted towards a household total income for eligibility purposes?
Right. So as we mentioned, one of the decisions that each of you gets to make is how you're going to treat household income in determining whether that household is income eligible for the program. And so you have a lot of flexibility in deciding, are you going to base income off of gross or net income, which types of sources of income you're going to exclude from the household income, partially or in full. The federal rules only mention a few types of resources that you must exclude from the household's income when determining eligibility. And some examples are SNAP benefits, WIC benefits, the National School Lunch Program, tribal per capita payments, federal student aid. But other than those few exclusions, anything else you exclude is up to you, or if you just want to limit to those exclusions, again, that's up to each of you.
Thank you. So how does that process differ if a grantee wants to use categorical eligibility instead?
Right. So again, grantees have the choice of whether or not to allow for categorical eligibility. And if they decide to do that, the statute in Assurance 2 allows you to select from the Temporary Assistance for Needy Families Program, TANF, Supplemental Security Income, SSI, Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, SNAP, and certain means-tested Veteran Administration benefits, or VA benefits. Not all VA benefits qualify for categorical eligibility through LIHEAP. And so if we move to the next slide, there's a listing of the different types of means-tested veterans programs that you can choose from for using categorical eligibility for LIHEAP. And again, the major threshold for all of these is that they are looking at the income of that household that has a veterans member. And there's a link here if you want to read a little more about each of these programs. And we give you the current legal citations. You see at the beginning of each bullet, 38 U.S. Code 15, what have you. And if we go to the next slide, just to kind of recap with categorical eligibility, it means that you're basically relying on the income determination that one of those other agencies has made for qualifying that household for TANF or SSI or one of those other programs. And so it really takes a lot of the burden off of the LIHEAP intake worker in deciding whether that household is eligible for LIHEAP, which again is one part of the decision-making process for LIHEAP. And so you get to decide, again, which of those programs you're going to rely on. Your LIHEAP intake worker is either going to look at the benefit level to know, or letter rather, to know that they're getting TANF or SSI, or perhaps you even have access for the intake worker to get into a state system to see, okay, they received SSI and this is how much they got. However, categorical eligibility cannot be your only income eligibility process. So Assurance 8 of our statute says you still have to allow for people to apply based on regular LIHEAP income limits. So a household that isn't getting SSI, TANF, means tested veterans programs should still be able to be determined eligible for the program based on meeting whatever limit you have set for LIHEAP, whether that's the 150% of FPG or 60% of SMI or something within those limits. And then, of course, you decide what the rest of the process is going to look like, and I'll talk about that in just a minute.
Okay, thank you. Would you say LIHEAP is relying on the preventive controls of these other programs to ensure that only eligible applicants or households are receiving benefits?
Right, they are. So in deciding that you're going to allow some households to be determined categorically eligible for LIHEAP based on their having received TANF, SSI, or one of those other programs, again, you're basically relying on that TANF intake worker or that SSI intake worker's determination of income eligibility for the purposes of LIHEAP. So if they make a mistake in calculating the income, or if they make a mistake in not getting all the documentation of sources of income for that household, unfortunately, that affects you as well, because ultimately you're still accountable for the households that receive LIHEAP payments regardless of the entity that is actually making the eligibility and benefit determinations for LIHEAP. So if you're relying on SNAP, for example, to do the income calculation and to look at the income documentation, again, any mistakes they make will affect LIHEAP. We can't use it as an excuse, well, it was a SNAP worker that made the mistake. Well, we're still relying on them in order to process the benefits. So making sure you have a good understanding of what controls, internal controls they have in place, and that you are in coordination with those agencies so that you can have some sort of comfort level that, okay, we're not increasing our risk for LIHEAP by relying on their intake workers' determinations for eligibility.
Can you give us a scenario of how the categorical eligibility process works?
Sure. So here we have an example where there's a household of 4, and as you know, for LIHEAP, we base eligibility off of household size, not family size. So, you know, it doesn't matter if the people in the household are related to one another. What matters is that they're all living together as one economic unit for the purposes of their home heating or cooling. And so, for example, if you have 4 people living in the household and they're all on a single electric meter and no one's paying rent to one another within the household, then those 4 people, regardless of whether they're related to one another, are considered one household for the purposes of LIHEAP. And so here we have a household of 4. They happen to be related, and the only assistance that they're getting is the Children's Health Insurance Program assistance. Unfortunately, that's not one of the 4 types of programs that we just listed for categorical eligibility. So we would not be able to treat that household as categorically eligible for LIHEAP. We would have to still have the LIHEAP intake worker process a normal LIHEAP application for them, request all their income documentation, review that, and do the income calculation and make that income eligibility determination for themselves. But in the next slide, we see that the scenario changed a little bit, and a 5th person joins the household, Francis. And Francis happens to be getting SSI, and as it so happens, the household is also getting TANF. So if this household lives in a state or on a tribal reservation or territory where they allow categorical eligibility for SSI or TANF, then that grantee could consider this household categorically eligible for LIHEAP, assuming, again, that the household member provided a benefit letter from SSI or TANF, or that our LIHEAP grantee has access to one of those systems to confirm the household got TANF or SSI, and that would be the end of the income eligibility determination. You wouldn't have to, again, collect the income documents to review or, again, repeat the income calculation. You could just rely on the fact that they got SSI as being good enough to be eligible for LIHEAP. Of course, as we're going to talk about next, there's still the second half of the equation, which is, okay, now that they're eligible, how much LIHEAP do they get?
Does categorical eligibility eliminate the need for the LIHEAP intake worker to gather non-eligibility documentation?
And the answer is no. As you know from Assurance 5 of our LIHEAP statute, it requires that all grantees vary the amount of LIHEAP assistance to each household based on the total household income, the total household size, the number of household members you have, and some factor relating to energy cost or need. So you need a minimum of 3 different factors for varying the program benefits. You can look at more than one factor of energy cost or need, but you have to at least look at one. And some examples of those kinds of energy cost or need criteria could be the dwelling size, if it's a single family home versus an apartment, or perhaps the geographic location of the household within the state. Some states or tribes are large enough where the northern end may have a very different climate than the southern end. It could be the fuel type. We know some are much more expensive than others. So it could also be the presence of a vulnerable member. So you might give a higher benefit to a household that has a senior or a young child than a household that just has healthy adults. But in all cases, regardless of who determined the income eligibility, there still has to be a separate determination of how much does that household get in LIHEAP assistance. And so there are certain documents that an intake worker will need to look at in order to decide how much of the LIHEAP benefit that household should get. That would be usually the utility bill. It might be a rental agreement to see if, for example, the household has their heat included in their rent, to see that that provision is in there, and to know that they're not 100% subsidized, for example. If you're looking at crisis assistance for LIHEAP, you might be looking at a disconnection notice or some documentation that they're out of their deliverable fuel. So again, categorical eligibility reduces the work that a LIHEAP intake worker has to do with respect to looking at the income documentation and doing the income calculation. That those steps get skipped for the most part, but they still have to look at the benefit documentation and decide how much that household's going to get.
Thanks, Lauren. And if we could stop just for a second, and Anita, I wondered if you wanted to remind people about how to enter questions into the questions pane.
Definitely. And I see we actually already do have a couple questions that have started coming in. Thank you for that. If you want to just enter in some questions into the control panel on the right-hand side of your screen, you can enter it in and get in the queue, and we'll definitely call on you when it's time for Q&A. Or you can click on the raised hand icon, and that will alert us that you also have a question, and we can call on your name then. And actually, I don't know if you want to pause, take the question, because it's kind of revolved around what Lauren's going through right now, or we can continue to hold them until the end.
Lauren, how would you like to do that?
We can take them now. That's fine.
Okay, great. Well, let me get there. Our first question is from Martha Gunkin. I'm sorry if I mispronounced your name, Martha. Your line is unmuted if you'd like to ask Lauren the questions you were typing in.
Okay, sure. And you did a great job on my last name, by the way. Just had a couple questions. In terms of our tribal per cap, I do understand, if I'm understood correctly, anything over $2,000 we count. I am with the tribe, and their per cap annual payments are a lot greater than the $2,000. But they recently, just this year, added a benefit about a month ago to our tribal people to get what they call a utilities card for a maximum of $200 a month to use to pay on such things as light bills and phone bills, etc. How do we consider that when we're looking at income now? My concern was I don't want to do any kind of double dipping per se because tribal members are now getting a resource, and I don't know if we need to consider that or not. And then my last question is when we have someone who comes in and presents that maybe they have something like food stamps and they show us their paperwork and it's evident to us they've not actually reported their true income just by our knowledge of like tribal per cap, which is taxable income for us. How do you handle that?
Okay, good questions. So if I understood the first question, you're saying that the tribe is using tribal funds to provide a separate utility assistance to everyone in the tribe?
All tribal households.
All tribal households, and it's not income-based, they just get it automatically?
It's just a benefit, and it literally just happened last month, so this
Okay.
is completely new territory for me.
Okay, so, and it's the first I've heard of that, although I'm sure there might be other examples of tribes doing something similar. So, again, this is something where you have a lot of flexibility in deciding how you're going to define what types of sources of income or resources to include in calculating a household's income for purposes of LIHEAP eligibility. So we don't have a federal rule that would require you to include or exclude this particular utility resource. I think it's perfectly reasonable that if you wanted to choose to include that in the household's income and resources, that would make sense, but we don't have something that would require you to do so. Does that make sense?
It does.
Okay.
And I believe the tribal utilities card is considered under the general welfare exemption, so it's not taxable, and that's kind of what I've been using for me as a rule of thumb is what is taxable we count as income.
Okay.
What is not, and I didn't know if that would be a good way to look at that.
I think it is. That makes a lot of sense, definitely.
Okay.
And your second, sorry.
Yeah, the second question is because our tribal per cap, and it's been a blessing, this is really our first experience with actually having fairly decent tribal per cap go out, yet we have people that are coming in on food stamps and we know that they're not eligible, they're not reporting the taxable income from the tribe. What is our responsibility when we know that they're basically committing fraud to get a government program?
Right. So certainly you'd want to, I'm assuming this is a different office in the tribal government that is, so actually these are food stamps, so they're being processed by the state office?
Yes.
Okay. So you could certainly work with that state office that processes the food stamps, the SNAP benefits, to raise any concerns you may have. The state usually also has the equivalent of an inspector general where you can make anonymous fraud or waste and abuse tips. And even the U.S. Department of Agriculture would also have an inspector general that you could make a similar anonymous tip to report any concerns you have about misreported income, and then they will usually refer that for some kind of investigation. So this brings us back to an interesting decision, because if you feel like there's a systemic problem with tribal members reporting inaccurate income to the SNAP office,
right.
you may not want to rely on SNAP as a categorical eligibility program, knowing that. Because if you have better controls in place for your LIHEAP eligibility process, you might want to just not even get involved with relying on them doing the sole income eligibility determination.
Okay, so we can basically kind of pick which one of the categorically eligible programs that we can utilize?
Exactly, right. So the statute, the LIHEAP statute says you can choose among these 4 different types of programs, but you don't have to rely on all of them. You can say, I'm only going to rely on TANF or SSI, or I will rely on all of them, or just a handful of them. You can certainly pick and choose which ones you want to rely on, or you don't have to rely on any of them. It's completely your choice.
Okay. That's great.
Great. Thanks.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Martha, for your questions. I'm just going to take one more question from Sharon Gamble, because I think, Sharon, was your question about the slide that we're currently showing on the screen? Go ahead, Sharon, your line is unmuted.
Sorry, I had myself muted. Yeah, it's about the slide that's on the screen. In the answer, it says that LIHEAP benefits, and I need to move this thing over to the side so I can see the whole slide. It says that the benefits are varied by 1, 2, and 3, but when Lauren addressed that issue, she said 1, 2, or 3, which is correct.
So it's and 3. You have to vary by a minimum of 3 factors, which must include household income and household size.
Okay.
And then some third factor relating to home energy cost or need.
Okay.
You can vary by more than 3 factors, right? You could look at household income, household size, fuel type, dwelling size. I mean, you could keep going on and on.
Yeah.
But we're looking for a minimum of 3.
Okay. Thank you, Lauren.
Thanks.
Great. We'll go on with the presentation then. Thank you.
Okay.
So, Lauren, what is the impact of using categorical eligibility?
Okay, so as we sort of alluded to, it means that you are now relying on whichever of those other programs' rules are for income eligibility. So, for example, most of those other programs will have different income eligibility limits. Usually SNAP is less, depending on where you're setting your LIHEAP income maximum at. TANF might be much higher. So households that ordinarily might not qualify for LIHEAP can now be considered eligible because you are basing the eligibility off of that program's income eligibility requirements. And then generally, you might be coordinating more with other programs. So as Martha highlighted, you might see instances of fraud that you need to report, or you might want to set up some sort of data exchange with that other agency, or you might want to gain access, as we were discussing, in terms of verifying that they're actually getting the SSI benefit rather than having to have the household show you a copy of their SSI benefit letter. Now, you know, for a lot of grantees, you might actually just be relying on a copy of the benefit letter and not using any system, and you know, that's acceptable. Of course, from a program integrity perspective, we encourage you to do what you can to try to take that a step further and not just get the documentation, but actually verify that it's accurate. But so there just might be more coordination in working with those other agencies that are doing intake for those programs.
Okay. Does the LIHEAP statute provide for any other requirements when it comes to categorically eligible households?
Yes. So Assurance 8 of the LIHEAP statute talks about not treating categorically eligible households differently from other types of households. And so we've given some examples here of what would not be permissible. So for example, only allowing for LIHEAP eligibility to be determined based off of categorical eligibility would not be permissible. You would still need to have that other option of determining eligibility based on your LIHEAP specific income eligibility of 150 or 60%. Likewise, not treating categorically eligible households different from your regular income LIHEAP income eligible households in terms of having different benefit levels for households that are determined eligible through categorical eligibility versus your regular LIHEAP rules, or having additional eligibility criteria that only are applied to the categorical eligible or the other non-categorical eligible households. So the basic gist of this is that you want to have the same you don't want, it's like, for example, with the discrimination clause regarding renters and homeowners. You want to have parity between the two. So with renters and homeowners, for example, it's not that they have to get the same benefit, but that it's reasonable with respect to their needs. And so likewise here, categorical eligibility, it's only changing who is actually making the income eligibility determination, but you're not saying, and they have to meet these additional criteria that other LIHEAP households don't have to meet. Not sure if I was clear about that, but if there are any questions, I'd be happy to take that now or later.
I think we'll wait till later. We only have a few more slides, and if anyone does have a question, go ahead and enter that in the questions pane of your control panel. How does categorical eligibility differ from automatic enrollment?
Okay. So some grantees will take it a step further and actually automatically enroll or provide a LIHEAP benefit if certain criteria exist. So, for example, in New York, if someone goes and submits an application to the SNAP office, they can automatically receive a LIHEAP regular benefit as well. They don't have to go to the LIHEAP office and submit a separate LIHEAP application. So they're further reducing the intake burden by almost having sort of a joint application process that takes care of both the eligibility determination as well as the benefit determination for LIHEAP. Things to be mindful of automatic enrollment is that if in particular you're relying on another agency other than your LIHEAP agency to do the enrollment, whether it's a SNAP office or somebody else, you just want to make sure that you have those that understanding between your agencies as to the LIHEAP benefit variation that we were just talking about. And so, for example, they would still need to collect a utility bill or whatever other benefit documentation you require so that they can know how much of a LIHEAP benefit to provide that household. And you'd have to have some process in place for them to know what your LIHEAP payment matrix or benefit matrix is so that, again, they're able to vary benefits as needed. And so it's just not, it's making sure that you're not losing the two-step process for income eligibility versus LIHEAP benefit determination.
Makes sense. Would you describe how some states implement categorical eligibility?
Sure. So we've seen a few different approaches to this. Of course, one is to just require the LIHEAP application with only a copy of the benefit letter from SSI or TANF, whichever program you're relying on. Or as we just talked about with New York, it might be through that other application, but making sure they collect all the documentation needed for LIHEAP. It could be relying on the income eligibility determination of that other program like SNAP, but then also through the LIHEAP application process, looking at any other documentation you may have for additional eligibility requirements, such as the co-payment or the work, any documentation that they're working or in school or what have you. And then there are a few states that actually have established additional programs that they consider categorical eligibility for, and so just to be mindful there that it should still be, in those cases, it should be within your state or tribal income limitations for LIHEAP. So the distinction here is that the federal LIHEAP statute says you can rely on the income rules of SSI, TANF, certain veteran programs, and so it acknowledges that there will be different income limits with those programs. If a state or tribe or territory wants to have additional programs that qualify for categorical eligibility, because they are not referenced in our federal statute, you would need to make sure that they fall within your LIHEAP specific income thresholds at greater of 150% FPG or 60% SMI.
Thank you.
Yep. And so here we have a table of just a handful of a sample of a handful of states that use categorical eligibility, and as you can see, some of them are using all 4 programs that are available. Some of them are only using 1 or 2. Some of them are using it for all the different types of LIHEAP assistance that they offer, and some are only limiting it to 1 or 2 different types of LIHEAP assistance. And then you can also see there's an example of a state that is doing automatic enrollment. So if you want to reach out to some of your colleagues and hear a little more directly from them about how that's been working for them and what processes they've been setting up for this, these are a few that you can turn to.
And the full table of these states is listed on the Clearinghouse website for LIHEAP as well.
Okay, so just to recap, categorical eligibility is an option for each of you. You do not have to do it. The same is true for automatic enrollment of LIHEAP through another program. But if you choose to offer categorical eligibility, it cannot be the only way that a household is allowed to be considered eligible for LIHEAP. You still have to set your LIHEAP-specific income limits for those who don't receive those types of assistance. You can use categorical eligibility for all of your different components of LIHEAP or for just one or some. We do ask that in your LIHEAP plan that you explain if you're using categorical eligibility and for which types of assistance and which particular programs you're relying on. That's section 1 of your LIHEAP plan. And it's there are 3 questions in particular. There's question 1.4 that has a little chart for you to break down yes or no by type of LIHEAP assistance and type of categorical program. And then question 1.5 asks about whether you're doing automatic enrollment. And then 1.6 asks about how you ensure that categorical eligible households and non-categorical eligible households are not treated differently or discriminated against. And again, you should have written policies and procedures that are clear that you allow for categorical eligibility and what that process is, so that if you're ever audited or what have you, it's very clear that that is something that you allow and what the process looks like. One of the benefits of categorical eligibility is that it reduces the time for the LIHEAP intake worker because there's very little they have to do in terms of the income. It's just having that benefit letter or having access to the system to confirm they're getting SSI or what have you, but not having to do all of the full income calculations and what have you. And lastly, as LIHEAP grantees, you're still accountable for any improper payments made with federal LIHEAP money, regardless of which entity you're relying on to make those eligibility or benefit determinations. So again, if you are going to do categorical eligibility and particularly automatic enrollment, where you're relying on another agency to do a lot of this work for you, you just really want to be aware of what controls and processes they have in place. You know, maybe be able to monitor them through their A133 audit reports, and take other steps just to have some comfort level that you're not significantly increasing the risk to you of improper payments being made.
Great, thank you. And now it's your turn for any questions and open discussion. And Benita, if you want to go ahead.
Yep, I sure would. Thank you so much, Lauren. We have a few questions in the queue. Our first question comes from Daniel Carlock. Go ahead, Daniel. Your line is unmuted.
Yes, one of the questions I have is, say you have a family that lives in low-income housing and already receives, I guess, the benefits from the federal government to be able to assist with their housing, and then they receive a utility allowance. Would that make them ineligible due to that?
Okay, so if they're getting a utility allowance through either their housing subsidy or through the housing subsidy, no, it would not make them ineligible for LIHEAP from the federal rules. I mean, what you'd really want to be looking at is the extent of the subsidy. So is there 100% subsidy of their heating or cooling costs? If so, then that means that household really has no out-of-pocket home energy burden, and therefore, even though they might be income eligible for LIHEAP, they really don't qualify for a LIHEAP benefit because they're not actually, none of their resources are really paying towards their heating or cooling bill. If they're only getting a partial utility allowance or subsidy, but they still are paying in addition to that, you can certainly have a LIHEAP benefit go to that household, and just you would want to make sure that that benefit is lower to take into account that they are getting another subsidy.
Okay.
Likewise with SNAP, for example, there's the issue of that they can get the standard utility allowance through SNAP, and so the fact that they get a utility allowance or that they get SNAP doesn't preclude them from getting LIHEAP assistance as well. And so really you're just talking in relation to SNAP with respect to income eligibility. So for example, with SNAP, they look at, are they getting a certain amount of energy assistance to decide how much of a SNAP benefit they're going to get. But from LIHEAP, that the fact that they're getting SNAP would not preclude them from getting a full LIHEAP benefit. Does that make sense?
It sure does.
Okay. So that energy need comes in.
Yeah, that made perfect sense.
Okay, great.
Okay. Thanks so much, Daniel. Our next question comes from Kaylee McNeil. Go ahead, Kaylee. Your line is unmuted.
Thank you. I was actually asking about, you guys were talking about the categories and being the fact that we could choose them to assist us. The one lady was talking about fraud, and if, say, SNAP doesn't realize there's income coming in, what can we pick and choose when we're going to use that? Like, say we have a family that we know is legit, telling the truth and whatnot, use that category on them, but then if we know someone is lying, choose not to use it on that person? Or does it have to be the same? Like, if we're going to use the categories, we have to use them for everybody that is eligible to use them, and then if we're not going to, do the same thing?
Yeah. So, yes. So, generally speaking, if you're saying that someone can be considered categorically eligible for LIHEAP based on them having received TANF for assistance, for example, then the fact that they come in and they submit a LIHEAP application, they show you their TANF benefit letter, that should take care of the income eligibility determination part of LIHEAP, and then your intake worker would be deciding the benefit level. But if there's something about the application that you think there's some sort of fraud going on, again, this is where I would refer to other resources, whether it's within the tribe if you have some sort of fraud investigator, or if you're relying on one of these programs through the state, talking to the state to say, you know, I'm not sure that we're getting accurate information here. That's certainly doing due diligence to try to follow up on suspected fraud.
Okay.
But generally speaking, you just want to be you just want to be careful that households can't claim that they're being unfairly discriminated against or excluded, that there's favoritism or bias or anything like that going on. So to the extent that you can have clear written policies in place about, you know, what your process is if you suspect fraud, who you're going to contact, or what investigation steps should be taken by your staff, that will help protect you against any claims by someone that, oh, they were unfairly denied LIHEAP assistance.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
Okay. Thank you so much, Kaylee. We have a follow-up question from Sharon Gable again. Go ahead, Sharon, your line is unmuted.
And we're going to beat this horse to death, just so I'm clear on this,
sure.
Lauren. So if a household comes in, an applicant comes in, and there's an SSI letter, for instance, for a household member, we don't need to look at any of the income for any other household member. We can consider them categorically eligible based on the fact that one of the household members receives SSI as a benefit.
That's correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
And Sharon, did you want us to go back to slide 8? Did you need to see something on that?
Yeah. If we're done with this one, then yeah, I did want to go back because the slide 8 about the VA, the other VA, or the included or excluded VA, whatever that is. I wanted to make sure I got a good look at that slide while I had. I'm sorry, it's not A. It's the one that has all the VA things listed on it. I thought it was 8.
I think slide 7 is what you're referring to.
That's the one, and I wanted to look at this and make sure that that I had a look at all of them in case, you know, there's a question about any of them, because I don't know any of these.
Yeah, it's so we don't know of too many states that are relying on means-tested VA benefits for categorical eligibility. There are a few, but I imagine there will not be many households that actually get these types of assistance, depending on your area. And so, you know, if you choose to allow any of these programs for categorical eligibility, we would probably want to encourage you to talk with someone with the Veterans Administration, and we can help connect you with the right person there so that you feel comfortable understanding what sort of documentation you'd be looking at and any other questions you have about it.
Okay.
Because the LIHEAP statute has some very specific references in Assurance 2 of qualifying veterans programs. And so what we've tried to do on this slide is give you the current legal citations so that you can fairly quickly, or your staff attorney can fairly quickly look them up and see what they are.
Okay. The link that you have at the bottom of the page, is that a link? I don't see VA, so I don't know.
No, it's not from the Veterans Administration. It's actually from the Federal Congressional Research Service, CRS, and that organization kind of an independent arm to Congress where they produce reports about different programs. And so this is the link to a report that they did a couple years ago about means-tested veterans programs. And so it gives you a little more background information. But no, you're right, it's not a link to the VA. We can certainly provide you additional links or contact information to the VA if you'd like that.
I would be interested in a contact at the VA. I mean, you said that you can get us information about who to contact or whatever. Texas has a lot of military veterans, and so it might be pursuing for us.
Sure, I will look into that and follow up with you.
Great. Thank you, Lauren.
Sure.
Great. Thanks so much, Sharon, for all your questions. They're really helpful. Our next question comes from Lee Ivinson. Go ahead, Lee. Your line is unmuted.
Thank you. I have a question about per capita distributions. As we know, per capita distributions from gaming revenues that's distributed to tribal citizens is federally taxed. Wouldn't this benefit be used in taking into consideration the eligibility determinations for LIHEAP?
My understanding is that tribal per capita payments relating to gambling are to be excluded.
They're excluded from the LIHEAP determination?
That's correct.
See, I had a different interpretation. I thought the per capita distributions from land trusts were excluded from determinations, but per capita from gaming revenues that are in a tribe's revenue allocation plan to distribute those funds were includable.
Okay. And that, let me double check on that, and I can follow up with you. I'm glad you're making that distinction, yes.
Yeah, that's how we had interpreted it when we did our review of our income, unearned income areas for tribal programs as well as LIHEAP and other federal programs.
Okay, great. So I will definitely double check on that and follow up with you. And we can maybe put a clarification on the slide for when it gets posted for everyone for future reference.
Okay.
Okay, great. Thanks so much, Lee. Just as I didn't get a chance to mention this to everyone at the start of the session, and I apologize. We are recording this webinar, and all the slides will be posted on the LIHEAP Performance Measurement website at a later date. So if you do have any questions, you can always email us, or we'll get you in touch with Lauren and others from the OCS team. But we are going to make these slides available to all of you. We can send out a link to all of you once they are posted. So we will make them available. I know I see some questions coming in asking about that, so I just wanted to clarify that for the group. And I should have mentioned that earlier. Okay. We have a couple more questions. Thanks so much to everyone who's been participating. This is a great discussion. Our next question comes from Katina Campbell. Go ahead. Your line is unmuted.
Hi. I'm new to all this, so I was just double checking because the way I was taught to do it, when we have the SSI or the TANF or any of that as automatic eligibility, we still include that with the other household incomes to get our income level for the point system, correct?
For the benefit determination, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, because I thought I heard somebody say before this that you didn't include other income, so I was like, did I miss that or did I misunderstand that?
So what should be happening is that the household has not changed since they were certified for one of those other programs, right? So when someone went in to apply for SSI or what have you, it was based on that household composition. And grant you, different programs are basing eligibility on different definitions of households. SNAP, for example, is relying on family size, and family and household are not necessarily the same thing, but again, for the purposes of categorical eligibility for LIHEAP, you're following their rules for the income eligibility part. But yes, you're reinforcing the point that the fact that the household is considered eligible for LIHEAP still requires work by the LIHEAP intake worker to decide, okay, how much LIHEAP do they get? And that has to be based on the total household income, total household size, number of family or household members, and then some other factor of home energy cost or need. So you still need to know that. So they should have the documentation of what that household income amount was determined to be.
Okay, so that's where I'm kind of confused, because we just have them giving us documentation showing what they get on a monthly basis from SSI, and then we add that to our other totals for household income.
Okay.
Is there something more specified that we're supposed to have from these people that are getting the automatic eligibility? SSI?
No, I mean,
As long as we have something showing their actual income from SSI, that's enough documentation.
right, that would be, where are you located?
We're in Oroville, California.
Okay. All right. So the process you're using makes sense.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure if there was something more we're supposed to be doing or not.
No, I think what you're doing is fine.
I think I just misunderstood the person prior to me, thinking that they said that, you didn't have to include any income if they were automatically eligible. And I'm like, wait a minute, am I missing something here? So I wanted to clarify.
Right. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks so much. All right. Our next question comes from Martha again. Go ahead, Martha. Your line is unmuted.
Okay. And I actually had forgotten to ask this earlier. We have generally made it a practice of sorts to, at kind of the end of the fiscal year, to get supplies for folks to help out with energy costs, such as the light bulbs, perhaps heaters or blankets, windbreakers, that sort of thing for their doors. And when the clients don't claim those materials, what are we supposed to do with the leftovers that we can't necessarily return back to the supplier that we purchased them from? And also, based off of that last conversation you had, we were doing categorically eligible and providing LIHEAP here based on categorically eligible folks not necessarily considering their other income. For example, if they had SSI, we consider them categorically eligible. So I'm understanding that's not the correct way to do it.
Okay, so going back to the first question regarding the supplies, so you're incurring an obligation, say this year, you can be expending out on those, paying out on those obligations, and then giving those out. If you're saying you've approved a specific application for receiving, say, a fan, a window unit or something, and then they don't actually come to pick it up?
Basically, yes.
Okay, so it would just remain in your inventory, and then you could use it for future applicants that you deem eligible. And you already have the inventory on stock, so you would just maintain that and use it up until everyone does actually claim what they've been deemed eligible to receive. We would not expect that you're returning any unused inventory at the end of each fiscal year. For example, if for some reason you were unable to give them all out before the end of September, you would just continue to give them out in the next program year as you are approving new applications.
Okay. And then the issue regarding the categorically eligible, we have not been looking at their additional income. We could consider them categorically eligible and would award them based on, for example, SSI, if the household was receiving that. So I'm understanding we have not been doing that correctly.
Sure. Just 1 minute, please. Right. So I'm sorry for the confusion on this. So you would still need the income for the other household members in order to know how much of the LIHEAP benefit to be giving them. And as the last person was, I'm sorry, I forget which person we were talking to, Katina maybe, was saying you're adding the SSI benefit, for example, to the other sources of income. So when they're filling out the LIHEAP application, they're still listing all the different sources of income.
Yes.
Right. Was there still something that needed to be clarified about that?
I guess we had considered if they were categorically eligible, we awarded them LIHEAP without considering the other income because they were categorically eligible.
Okay. So when you're looking at the fact that they got SSI, for example, you're relying on the fact that they're income eligible. The purpose of knowing the total household income is for using with respect to your payment matrix, right? So if the total household income is whatever, $10,000, that's going to help you look at your matrix to figure out, okay, they get a $500 LIHEAP benefit.
Okay, I understand what you're saying now. I was just confused.
Right. So in other words, you're not redoing the income calculation that the SSI staff did to know that they're eligible for LIHEAP, right? Because if you redid the income calculation, you probably would say, oh, they're not eligible for LIHEAP because SSI has most likely a different income cutoff than you have for LIHEAP. But what you still need from the LIHEAP application is just to know the total household income so that you can know how much of a benefit for LIHEAP to give them.
Okay, that makes sense.
Okay, I'm sorry that I was confusing on this point.
All right. Thanks so much, Martha.
Sure.
We have another question from Kaylee. Go ahead, Kaylee. I unmuted your line.
Thank you. My question was kind of in the same aspect as what the last one was, only what happens if, or is it possible for, say, a veteran to qualify under the programs you had listed, but still be over income? I mean, I haven't ever run into this, but is that a possibility? Say someone is over income for the requirements you have for the program, but are categorically eligible.
Yes, right. So TANF is a good example of this, where the income eligibility may be much, much higher than our LIHEAP federal cutoff of 150% federal poverty or 60% state median income. So we understand that someone who is considered income eligible for TANF technically would not be income eligible for LIHEAP. But if in your LIHEAP plan and your LIHEAP operations or policy manual you say we're relying on TANF for categorical eligibility for LIHEAP, the fact that they qualified for TANF is okay for purposes of qualifying for LIHEAP, even though they technically are above the LIHEAP income threshold.
Okay, so when it comes to determining the benefits and you include their income into your benefit matrix, is it still going to give them a benefit, or is it going to pop out with nothing because of how high the income is?
Well, it should still give them, should still give you a benefit. Have you been running into a problem with that?
I haven't actually had this, I haven't done this before, but I wanted to, the place that I work, the association that I work for, where doing more with our veterans, and I wanted to advertise this to my boss so that we could start advertising it more with our veterans and be like, this is an opportunity that we aren't, hitting on, that I thought we might be able to. But
Sure.
I figured I'd better know this answer in case it comes up.
Sure. So you should still they would really just be at the top of your income criterion in your payment matrix, really.
Okay. So whatever the highest benefit amount that we could offer, highest income amount, that we could look at, that would be the one they'd fall under because of the fact they were categorically eligible but over income.
If they're a household that was deemed eligible, received that other program benefit, but their actual income is higher than your LIHEAP cutoff, you'd just be looking at your highest LIHEAP cutoff for income.
Okay. Wonderful. Thank you.
Thanks.
Perfect. Thank you so much. We received another question that I'm going to ask for person who wants to remain anonymous. Do we need to refer households with children to TANF if they are not already receiving a grant? Or may we assist them and also refer but not make referral mandatory?
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question one more time?
Yes, of course. Do we need to refer households with children to TANF if they are not already receiving a grant? Or may we assist them and also refer but not make that referral mandatory?
Yes, I think the answer is to both ways that you look at that question. So we certainly encourage grantees to try to do referrals and case management activities to the extent possible, and that's to, as really trying to look at the household as holistically as possible, looking at TANF, looking at the Community Services Block Grant Program, which our office also administers federally. There's also the Assets for Independence Program that helps low-income households save towards particular goals, whether it's buying a home or a car or starting a business. So there are a wide variety of programs that you can try to look at whether a household might be a potential candidate for, and referring on to, of course, you've probably been hearing us talk about the Affordable Care Act and trying to be aware of households that might not have health insurance and just pointing them in the right direction to try to get more information about that. So we don't require you to do referrals or case management, but we do encourage you to do it. So absolutely you can refer on, but you don't have to.
Okay, great. And I hope that helps clarify for the person who is asking the question. We also received some other questions in regards to if we have an example document that provides a good example of the benefits determination based on income, family size, and energy cost. Is there a resource for that?
Sure. We've done a presentation or two in the past about how to develop a payment matrix, and part of that presentation talks about, gives you different examples of how you can, we actually pull from actual grantees' payment matrices and show those as examples. So Benita, perhaps I can provide you with the link to that, and you can send a follow-up note to everybody.
Absolutely.
Great.
Link to the payment matrix. Great. Okay. And if anyone else has any other questions, just a quick reminder, you can either type it into the question box in your control panel, or if you just click on the raised hand icon, I can call on you that way and then mute your line. Really want to thank again to everyone who has been asking such great questions. I hope it's been a worthwhile discussion for the whole group. I'll just give it a few more seconds. If anybody has any more questions, go ahead and just hit that raised hand icon or type it in.
And likewise, if anyone has any feedback that you'd like to share with the group if you are using categorical eligibility and there's something you want to highlight in terms of something that really worked well or that was more of a challenge, please feel free to share.
Definitely. That's a great point. Okay, we have another question from Martha. Go ahead, Martha. Your line's open.
Thank you so much. I apologize for asking so many questions, but this is sort of a present issue for us. If somebody comes in and they're receiving the SNAP benefit, they're reporting their household income around $11,000. You add in the taxable per cap of about $24,000, then you have an income over $35,000. Yet they're still eligible for the food stamps, which we have counted as categorically eligible. I'm understanding based off of the income, we would not award them LIHEAP, even though they would be considered in our grant period this year categorically eligible. Is that correct?
So if you've decided to allow LIHEAP categorical eligibility based on SNAP or food stamps, as long as that household actually qualifies for the food stamps and they can show you the benefit letter from food stamps, you can consider them eligible for LIHEAP regardless of what that actual income is. The only reason why you need to look at the income any further is in relation to your LIHEAP benefit matrix to decide what benefit level they get. But we understand that for a household that you're allowing eligibility based off of receipt of one of these other benefit programs, they are most likely, in many cases, going to be over income for LIHEAP. And so, some people, when grantees decide whether or not to use categorical eligibility, one consideration is kind of that perception issue that some households that ordinarily would not qualify for LIHEAP will now qualify for it based on receiving one of these other types of assistance. And that's just the rules, the way they were set up by Congress. It's allowable, and we acknowledge that. And that's just part of the situation. So it's really up to you if that's something that you are comfortable with and want to pursue. And of course, through your LIHEAP plan each year, you're getting public comment and participation on the development of that. So you might get questions from people about this, and you might want to explain it a little more and kind of have ready a reason for why you think it is helpful to allow these types of categorical eligibility households.
Okay.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Martha. We have another question from Star Narcomi. Go ahead, Star, your line is unmuted.
Okay. I had a question about the TANF award letter. Does that determine the eligibility for LIHEAP, or is it the income that's used to be qualified for TANF?
So you're asking about the TANF award letter and whether that's used
to determine your eligibility to qualify for LIHEAP. Or is it the income that they use? I don't know. I'm just hearing different things. I'm just getting confused.
So the fact that they have provided a copy of the TANF award letter can be enough for your intake worker to say they are income eligible for LIHEAP.
Alrighty.
And then you'll take the amount of TANF and look at any other sources of income that are reported on the LIHEAP application for determining the amount of the LIHEAP benefit. Now, keep in mind that back on slide, let's see, it was slide, which slide was it? Slide 5. which talks about defining income for LIHEAP, SNAP is not supposed to be included in sources of income for determining your LIHEAP benefit.
Okay.
So if you are allowing food stamps for categorical eligibility for LIHEAP, they'll provide you a copy of the food stamps benefit letter. That means you're okay to consider them eligible for LIHEAP. And then when you're looking at the total household income for determining the amount of LIHEAP benefit to give, you'll exclude the amount of the food stamps benefit from the total household income.
Okay.
But for the other types of categorical eligibility programs like SSI and TANF, you don't have to exclude those.
Okay.
You can if you want to, but you don't have to from our rules. You would ordinarily, grantees include that in the calculation for purposes of the LIHEAP benefit.
Okay. Gotcha. Thank you.
Thanks.
All right. Thank you so much, Star. I am mindful of the time, and we've got a couple more questions in the queue. Our next question comes from Andrea Kimball. Go ahead, Andrea. Your line is unmuted.
Hi, Lauren.
Hi.
My question is that here with our LIHEAP program, we have a payment matrix that is kind of a trifold thing. We have the size of the household, the income of the household, and then we have the cost of the energy burden to factor. And so we were listening to some of the previous questions, and we have one unique scenario that maybe you could help us on. We have a family of 3, and they're all adults. Both of the parents are full-time employed, but their daughter, who's an adult, receives SSI. Now, we have the SSI component as a categorically eligible component. So we would be able to determine that they were eligible for the program. However, their annual income or their income would exceed the normal LIHEAP income limits, and we use 60% of the state of Oklahoma's median income. And so when we're looking at our payment matrix, would we use, we know that we can assist the household because of the SSI, but to determine the benefit amount, would we go to the size of the household, or would we go to the household income?
Right. So interesting example, good example. So in that kind of benefit matrix, you usually have some kind of chart where you're finding the income range, you're finding the household size range, and then you're finding where that falls within the home energy burden.
Right.
And so you're still looking at all 3. And in the case where a household's income is really greater than what you would normally expect to see for LIHEAP, you would just go within that, whatever that maximum income row is, and align it up with, your household size of 3, whatever their home energy burden is or home fuel is, and then that maximum income within that range. Does that make sense?
Yes,
so
that makes sense.
Looking at all 3, you're just going with whatever the maximum income is that you see on your chart.
Okay, thank you. That answers our question.
Thanks. So, just
Sorry,
to try
I
to
just realized I was on mute.
Just to try to recap the issue, we had a question that kind of started us off about you don't have to redo the income calculation for purposes of income eligibility, and that's true. So as long as one person in the household that is seeking LIHEAP assistance gets one of these types of other assistance, be it SSI, TANF, some of these veterans programs, SNAP, that household is considered eligible for LIHEAP, even if the income exceeds your LIHEAP maximums. But you still need to know all of the income so that you can, as we were just discussing, figure out where they fall within your payment matrix for the amount of the benefit. And if it's off the charts, then it's just the maximum benefit, maximum income that you have listed.
Okay. Thank you for that clarification, Lauren. I am mindful that it is 4 o'clock now. Do you want to take a couple more questions? We have a couple more in the queue.
I'm still available if everyone else is.
Okay, great. Well, thank you. Well, then our next question comes from Jocelyn Flower. Go ahead, Jocelyn. Your line is unmuted.
Hi, Lauren. I think I'll just wait and sidebar mine. I need to probably speak to you all a little bit more in depth, so
Okay.
I'll wait on mine.
Sure, no problem, Jocelyn.
Thank you.
Okay. Thanks. Our next question is back to Kaylee. Go ahead, Kaylee. Your line is unmuted.
Thank you. My question, and you may have already answered it, I apologize if the first 15 minutes of it I missed, but if we're looking at categorical eligibility, does it have to be written in our plan, or is it something that as long as we're using the 4 federal ones, we can use them at any time?
It does need to be in your plan. That being, it's in section 1. There are 3 questions that kind of relate to this section. Questions 1.4, 1.5, and 1.6. That being said, if you, for example, in your 2015 plan that you submitted last September, if you forgot to mention it or you've now changed your policy to allow for it but you didn't before, you're more than welcome to do that. You don't need our prior approval. You can just, change your policy and then just revise your plan in our OLDC system for this year and just put a little remark with your plan. There's a remarks section on the form status page where you can let us know that you updated information on categorical eligibility. And as long as we call that a plan amendment or modification. We used to get those by email. Now we're trying to encourage everybody to do it through OLDC online. And so it really just ask that you do that within the same fiscal year, federal fiscal year, if possible. But you don't have to have made that change before you implement the policy change.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yep. And definitely we also encourage you to make sure it's in your written policies. So whatever LIHEAP manual you have for your intake workers, we encourage you to make sure it's clear in that as well, so that for them to understand, as well as if any auditors come in, it's very clear what your policy is and what the procedure is.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay. And we have one final question from Katina. Go ahead, Katina.
Oh, I just wanted to clarify that you said that you were going to inform one of the ladies before that was asking about the per capita distribution from gaming, whether that was included in the income or not, and you were going to find out a definite on that.
Yep.
Will we all have access to that information?
Yes, we'll put a clarification on slide, what slide would that be? Slide 5, defining income. And in a follow-up email, we'll mention that as well.
Okay, great. I just wanted to make sure, because we do include our gaming per capita as income, so I wanted to make sure I get that right one way or the other.
Okay. So it's just the land trust per capita that you're excluding?
Yeah, see, I'm not sure about that one. I just
Okay.
know that we get our per capita from the gaming.
Okay.
As far as I know. So as far as I know, that's the only thing we get it from. But I could be wrong, so I could clarify that myself.
Okay, well, we'll all take a look and get back to each other.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, and with that, those are all the questions we have in the queue. I just want to personally say thank you to Grace for helping to moderate the session, and a big thank you, of course, to Lauren for answering all of these awesome questions and explaining about this really valuable and important topic. Lauren, did you have any other final comments or anything you want to share with the group?
Not really, other than thank you for hanging in there. I hope this was helpful and provided more clarity than confusion. But if you have any follow-up questions that you weren't able to get to today, feel free to contact me or one of your liaisons with our office. We did just send out a notice today that we have brought on 2 new operations liaisons with our office, Kate Hayden and Jamia Furbush. And so, you'll be hearing from them as well in terms of which regions they've taken over responsibility for. So again, just feel free to reach out to our office and we'll be happy to walk through any questions you have on this. Thanks.
All right. Thank you so much to everyone who joined our webinar today. We hope it was valuable. Feel free to email me if you have any other questions as well. And we will have the slides and recording available in a few weeks for all of you. So thank you so much and have a